1996 is the year attributed to the creation of the fantastic fantasy graphic novel Yu-Gi-Oh! But as a dumb American, I didn't learn about it until it aired in the US in 2001. The show is about a spiky-haired kid that goes through puberty every episode so he can win a card game just to go back like nothing happened and with no one noticing. There's some major plot point about how his grandpa's soul was kidnapped and that's why he has to win the tournament. And then later at another tournament, we learn he's some Egyptian pharaoh or something. And then sometime later, after a weird storyline about 3 dragon knights and another tournament, they actually go back in time to Egypt to live out the lifetime of said pharaoh, while said pharaoh's spirit plays a tabletop RPG to decide their fate. Or something. It's a pretty bizarre story and made only stranger by the fact that it seemingly revolves around a trading card game. Upon closer inspection, you'll learn that Egyptian kings, or I guess whoever else could figure out how to do it, would summon monsters stored in stone tablets as a dick measuring contest or sport. This whole shadow game situation was later on recreated as a modern trading card game that also apparently reawakened the actual shadow games from long ago. Again, or something. The story of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very strange indeed. But it didn't always revolve around the card game. In fact, when it started, it was more of a psychological thriller about the main character, Yugi, blanking out and having lapses of no memory haviness. Only to find out he was being possessed by an evil spirit trapped in his puzzle necklace his grandfather gave him. That spirit was pretty much the Deus Ex Machina incarnate that could win any type of game or gambling-like scenario. Find yourself in a dice-type game? And he just knew the right way to angle and momentum and throw his dice, put a spin on it, and get whatever number he needed. Find yourself at a Six Flags and suddenly there's a psychopath that put bombs on the Ferris wheel? He just knew that a guy was on the Ferris wheel the whole time. There was a lot more to it than those two oversimplifications, and at one point he even burned a man alive for putting a gun to his not-girlfriend. Oh yeah. But after he was done with the barbecue and the original tabletop RPG game, the manga's creator Kazuki Takahashi decided to carry on the storyline of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but while focusing on an aspect of the world that only a few chapters out of the original series had touched upon. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game is as much of a run-on sentence as any other sentence in the script, because it started back with the original series over 20 years ago and is still going. Originally called Wizards and Magic within the series, it later got changed to Duel Monsters for obvious reasons. Personally, I like that more, but all in all, it's just a card game, so call it what you want. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game is an actual physical card game that is expected to be able to be played between 2 players. This means the game has to have rules, and that's kind of a pain in the ass when the game it's being modeled after didn't. You see, the card game was just a way of telling the story and progressing the plot. The main character has a variety of what you can imagine a protagonist would have for good guy monsters like knights, fuzzy creatures, warriors, wizards, even a skeleton monster for good measure. His friends and rivals would use similar monsters and a lot more dragons. Like a female character that uses her good looks to gain an advantage, also uses monsters that boast looks. The fisherman had a water deck, and this guy that probably created Pokemon uses an insect deck. The good looks girl gets kidnapped or whatever by a super dark creepy guy that attacks from the shadows. His deck goes on to utilize dark fiend monsters and featured a castle of dark illusions that happened to be floating above the field once summoned. There's this whole plot point about him summoning a bunch of monsters underneath it, then using a force field for a defense boost, but then Yugi goes and launches his Gaia Knight off his catapult turtle to destroy the castle's flotation ring, causing it to, after the Swords of Revealing Light wear off, then collapse on top of his monsters that, of course, can't escape because the force field was trapping them in. I mean, how the hell do you equate that into an actual card game? Well, luckily they didn't try to do that, and later on you could see how and when they actually tried to better market the game within the show as an actually playable game. Finally, the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Back in the day, Blue Eyes was king, until a Dragon Capture Jar managed bug showed up. The caveman days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was honestly a magical time, back when you almost really could play like they did in the show. Your deck would have a mash of whatever monsters you thought were the coolest, some spells and traps, not just a handful of good ones, but a wide array of equipped spells, a field or two, even a continuous spell or trap. The kinds of starting hands and game states you could find yourself in were truly bizarre and magical. Getting your monsters right by your opponent, only to then draw into a powerful spell or tripping off a trap, it was really a game for the ages. As time went on, the game got faster and more streamlined. Fusion monsters became more powerful and monsters started gaining archetypes. Fields became much more powerful, and they made it so both you and your opponent could have one out at the same time. Equipped spell cards became less and less useful, as well as battle traps. There's still a lot of useful ones, and there will always be cards that can be useful, but so many cards of old just aren't good anymore. I know. It's hard to imagine that something introduced into the game on day one just isn't as good 25 years later. Who knew? Fusions needed oddly specific monsters and a spell card, so they introduced Synchros. Those just required a tuner and a non-tuner, and they had to be on the field, but you had to do math. The Exist monsters just made it so you just have to have two monsters of the same level, and then they became ammo for the Exist monsters' effects. Pendulum Monsters are a fever dream that I think only I enjoy, and allowed you to pendulum summon 5 monsters at the same time in one action. I think only I enjoyed that. Link monsters came in with their big dick swinging to curb said pendulums, but unfortunately with their girth, hit all the other types of extra deck summoning too. They fixed that later and now we're here. Also, there's hella more searcher cards, extender plays, special summons aren't special, and hand traps. Fuck hand traps. You know they even had to introduce this thing called kaijus. They basically let you replace an opponent's troublesome boss monster with a much more manageable monster to be manhandled back into your possession. It's great. So, yeah. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game still exists, and some few years ago I decided to focus much more intently on it as the content for this channel. Basically, I was out of work and not homeless and was watching YouTube when I came across the DZeef channel. Now, I am a big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! And have been playing for several on and off years, and I also had a pre-existing YouTube channel where I tried talking about games. Look, I play video games like everyone else, and I grew up watching the AVGN and Game Grumps. When I realized, oh shit, I'm capable of doing that too, I decided to do it. Unfortunately, because I'm a soft baby bitch boy, I didn't stay at it as intently as I should have. I'll probably die on my deathbed with that as my biggest regret, not taking a lot more interest and bullheaded productivity into the video making scene. Not just about video games, but anything. Because it's fun to make something and put it out there, and later find out that someone found, watched, and walked away from it with a positive experience. That's the nice thing I think about in all this is that. But also it's hard to consistently come up with the daily content that isn't just entirely dribble. Literally listen to what I'm saying, I'm barely cohesive as is. It takes a lot to do the YouTube scene, and especially if you want to do it as a living. Your content has to not only be interesting and engaging, but also unique and or original enough to warrant gaining an audience. This means, as far as making Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube content, you have to wholly surround yourself with the game. And I mean, I really like Yu-Gi-Oh! I love the problem-solving card text and how you're supposed to black and white interpret card effects. I love how the battle phase is broken down into something as anally retentive as attack declarations and the damage step. There's people who have played the game for years and have a favorite monster card they keep under the pillow. They have no idea what you even do in the damage step. It's a great game, but it's just so boring. There's really only so many times I can duel in a day, much less a month or a week. Then to say you're supposed to engross yourself in so much of the game that you also have to make daily content about it, it's exhausting. I guess maybe you can just go the full-on explanative route and have a video about every single minute mechanic. God knows there's enough to do that. I've literally written a how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Script over 5 times, and that's not including the numerous revisions to each, and this is over the past few years. It's not really something you can fit in one script or video that people would actually watch. The whole reason I'm doing this is because I want a place to document it somewhere, as well as I know I have the footage to lay over. Even if I wasn't homeless and didn't have to work, and even if I could full-time devote myself to comfortably making YouTube content, I still don't think I'd be able to keep making content about Yu-Gi-Oh! Even with the over 10,000 unique cards, even with the crazy mechanics and even with the vast lore of the game and series behind it, I can't just masturbate with Yu-Gi-Oh! And gain points or whatever for it when I'm not playing it. Minecraft literally lets me play all by myself with no internet or other people necessary, and telling someone about something I build just feels more rewarding than a funny play interaction in a duel I had. No one has to play Minecraft to look at a floating house and go, "Oh, that looks cool." But literally only someone who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! Will ever appreciate the story about the time you beat your opponent, but only because of a graveyard effect that only happened because your opponent activated a card with an effect that caused you to send a card from the top of your deck to the graveyard. Like, great. You think the guy that does physical training for football really gives a shit? I bet he'd appreciate a cool looking house sooner, but he'd still kick your ass for it being in Minecraft. Also, I can AFK fish and gain resources from farms that just constantly are running in the background. And while it may not be from something wholly designed by me, like the rocket station, link in the description to that, it's also something that I still built by myself and can go on to enjoy at any point in time. With Yu-Gi-Oh!, I have to either hunt down a human player that isn't a total child and won't mind when I inevitably act like a total child, or I can play with a dumber than dirt AI of the amazing Edo Pro program. Look, I love this program and I will never not use it. It just has all the cards and it just works. Unless that new Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator is actual hot shit and not hot garbage, I'll probably just keep using this for any and all of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game playing needs. I can play Master Duel 5, Speed Duels, and Rush Duels, although I got really bored with Rush Duels really fast. There really is a whole world of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I'm genuinely thrilled about, but like I said, it's just not enough for me to have focused the entirety of my channel on. And I'm sorry for all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans whose hearts I pissed on with that decision. And I am trying to work some good old Yu-Gi-Oh! Back into the equation. My biggest problem is due to homelessness. It makes it much more difficult to professionally show off physical cards. Like, I still never made the video about my Sacred Beast deck profile. Also, since I don't have reliable and sturdy income, I can't keep buying the new product anyway. I suppose that's the benefit of doing everything digitally, and I definitely do still duel digitally on occasion, but it's just not the same. It doesn't feel as good. Yu-Gi-Oh! Started, for me, as a physical card game that I could shuffle the cards in my hands. Without a physical opponent to play against or a fresh supply of cards to keep things interesting, the game just isn't as appealing. When the game is entirely digital, I don't have the cost or the travel to worry about, but then you get into the fact that, digitally, you don't always have access to all forms of dueling. Some games are Master Rule only, while even Edo Pro, for the longest time, didn't even have all the Speed Duel cards. I still don't care about Rush Duels. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a great game, and I'll never not love it. Hell, after I finish writing the script and before I reread then record it, I'm gonna go play a bunch of random Edo Pro versus the AI. Why not a bunch of random Edo Pro versus random players online? Because I'm a bitch and I hate to lose. Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for watching this dumb Minecraft video set to me bitching about Yu-Gi-Oh! Heads up, I got frustrated with playing Yu-Gi-Oh! After writing and just went on to play Minecraft instead. So, yeah, I do. I love this game. Just not enough to do consistent content on it. But someday.